Usually when we talk about diagnosing a problem, there's this expectation of, like, mechanical precision.
Right, like a binary answer.
Exactly. Like, if you break your arm, you go to the hospital, they take an X-ray, and there's that jagged white line on the film.
And the doctor just points to it and says, yep, broken.
Yeah, it's a clean, comforting process.
Yeah.
Because I think we humans just desperately want our problems to be visible. We want them categorizable.
We really do. We want to know exactly what's wrong so we can just apply the right bandage and move on.
We want the moral and spiritual life to operate like a vending machine or, I don't know, a car engine.
Find the broken part, replace it, boom, done.
Right. But the landscape of the human soul just completely resists that kind of mechanical diagnosis. The spiritual reality of our daily choices operates in a realm that is, well, far more subtle.
And frankly, far more terrifying.
Which brings us to the absolute muddy waters of diagnosing the human condition. So I want you to imagine a scene. Picture a rainy, endless twilight.
Ugh, sounds miserable already.
It really is. You're standing in this dreary, sprawling town, and it's a place where time seems to have just paused on that exact dismal moment when the shops haven't quite lit up yet.
Like it's not dark enough to be comforting, it's just
gray. Exactly. So you're standing at a bus stop filled with these incredibly quarrelsome, bitter people. Everyone is elbowing each other, fighting for a spot on this flying omnibus.
Which is such a wild image.
It is. And this bus is preparing to travel millions of miles upward, out of the rain, into a shockingly bright, almost overwhelmingly solid country.
Yeah, the solid country.
Right. And that is the opening scene of C.S. Lewis's allegorical masterpiece, The Great Divorce. And today we are taking a massive deep dive into this text.
And we're bringing along a fascinating stack of theological analyses and devotional reflections that have been written about it.
We are, because the title itself, it sets up the fundamental argument of the entire book.
Yeah, Lewis was actually writing this as a direct rebuttal to the poet William Blake.
Right. Blake wrote that famous piece, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell.
Exactly. And Blake's idea, which honestly was popular then and is still super popular now, is that good and evil are just two sides of the same coin.
Like yin and yang.
Yeah, the idea that if you just have enough perspective, the dark and the light can be synthesized.
Yeah.
Or harmonized.
Married.
Right, married. But Lewis violently rejects that premise. He asserts that there is a great permanent divorce between good and evil.
You can't compromise them.
No, light and dark cannot compromise. You cannot bring a little bit of hell into heaven, and heaven just cannot comfortably coexist with hell.
So our mission today isn't just to, analyze a piece of mid-20th century literature.
Definitely not.
For you listening, we are taking a journey to decode what might actually be one of the most profound roadmaps for the Christian life ever written.
It really is a roadmap.
Our focus in this deep dive is to explore how this brilliant allegory actually inspires us to love Christ more deeply and to live for him more fully in the granular, mundane moments of our daily lives.
Because we're looking at the eternal weight of our daily routines.
Yes, we're going to see how the smallest, seemingly most insignificant choices you make today,
like how you respond to an annoying email,
or how you deal with a grievance against your spouse,
or how you handle a secret habit.
Exactly. How all those things are actually rehearsals for eternity.
The stakes are incredibly high, but they're completely masked by the ordinary nature of our lives.
And Lewis strips away that mask. But before we can understand the specific, agonizing choices the characters make in this story, we have to grasp the physical landscapes he creates.
Because the geography of this book isn't just background scenery. It's a profound theological argument.
It really is an argument about what a life lived with or without God actually looks like. So let's start with where the narrator begins his journey.
The Gray Town.
The Gray Town, which is Lewis's depiction of hell. And what immediately struck me in the source material is the total absence of traditional medieval imagery.
Yeah, there are no lakes of fire.
No demons with pitchforks roasting people on spits.
No, it's far more disturbing because it's so recognizable.
Right.
The Gray Town is characterized by infinite expansion and infinite isolation. The inhabitants are these ghosts. They're transparent, smudgy, fading entities.
And the town itself is unimaginably huge.
Yeah.
Because the people constantly quarrel.
The mechanics of how the town expands are just fascinating.
They really are. Like, a ghost arrives, they move into a house, and within a few days, they just get annoyed with their neighbor.
So they just move.
Right, because they can just imagine a new house, they simply think up a new one a little further down the street, and they move.
Then they get mad at the next neighbor.
And they move again. Over centuries, these ghosts have moved millions of miles apart from one another.
It's the ultimate gated community of one.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it.
And the ability to just imagine whatever they want is actually the trap.
How so?
Well, the houses they imagine don't actually keep out the perpetual rain. The food they imagine doesn't actually nourish them.
But it provides the illusion of safety.
Exactly. Because they can conjure these insubstantial versions of what they need, they never actually have to rely on anyone else.
So there's no economic basis in the gray town.
None. There is no need for cooperation, no friction of living in community, no interdependence.
They are entirely self-sufficient in their misery. So they never have to learn to love or tolerate each other. They just retreat further into the dark.
But then the bus takes the narrator up to the other landscape.
Heaven, or what Lewis calls the solid country. And this is where the imagery completely flips.
And it's such a drastic change.
The bus lands, and the ghosts step out into a world that is hyper-real. It's so bright and so physically dense that the ghosts are actually terrified of it.
Yeah, the grass doesn't bend under their feet.
No, it's as hard as diamond. And it literally pierces their ghostly, translucent feet, causing them agony.
The narrator tries to pick up a single tiny daisy, and he can't twist the stalk.
He tries to lift a single beech leaf off the ground, and it's heavier than a sack of coal.
Meanwhile, the people who live there, the solid people, are radiant. They're these massive, ageless beings whose very footsteps make the ground shake.
And this contrast brings us to a profound theological concept that the sources highlight. The Augustinian idea of privatio boni.
Ah, yes.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because I've seen that term thrown around in the reading. But what does that actually mean in the context of someone's daily spiritual life?
Sure.
Is that just an academic way of saying doing bad things?
Not exactly. Privatio boni translates to the privation of good. It's the idea that evil is not a substance in itself.
Okay.
It's not a created thing that has its own independent existence. Evil is parasitic.
Parasitic.
Yeah, it's a lack, a decay, a fading away of what is good. Much like blindness isn't a thing in itself, it's just the absence of sight.
Or like a cavity is not a thing, it's a lack of tooth.
Exactly. That's a great way to think of it. So in this cosmology, hell is a state of mind characterized by a soul that is incurvatus in se,
Which means
curved inward upon itself. Sin isn't just breaking a divine rule on a checklist. It is an active process of fading away into a non-entity. The more you cling to your own pride, your isolation, and your grievances, the less real you become.
But heaven, on the other hand, is not a state of mind. As one of the solid people says in the book, heaven is reality itself.
Heaven is reality itself. That completely reorients how we think about holiness.
It really does. The gospel is calling us out of the shadows of our self-absorption and into this bright, solid reality of Christ's kingdom.
Sin makes us fade. Holiness gives us weight and substance.
You know, it makes me think of living in a virtual reality simulation.
Oh, like a VR headset.
Yeah, imagine you were addicted to a VR headset. You're sitting in a dark, empty room, completely alone, physically atrophying.
But inside the headset.
Inside the headset, you are the king of the universe. You get whatever you want just by thinking about it. No one ever challenges you.
And none of it can actually nourish your body.
Right. And taking that VR headset analogy a step further, when someone finally comes into that dark room, rips the headset off your face, and drags you outside into the real physical world.
Your eyes are going to burn.
The sunlight is going to feel like a physical assault. The ground might feel harsh on your bare feet.
And that is exactly why the ghost's feet are pierced by the diamond grass of heaven.
Reality hurts when you have spent your life becoming a ghost.
The light of God's presence exposes their fading nature. Heaven is offered completely freely to all these ghosts who took the bus, but it demands the total surrender of their cherished illusions.
And their carefully constructed identities. Which explains the great mystery of this whole allegory.
Why they go back?
Exactly. If heaven is so beautiful and the bus ticket is free, why on earth do so many of the ghosts turn around and get back on the bus to go back to the dreary, rainy, gray town?
They struggle because stepping into the reality of God requires letting go of the self.
Which brings us to the first major psychological hurdle we encounter in the book. The tragedy of clinging to our rights.
This is a devastatingly recognizable encounter. We meet a character known simply as the Big Ghost.
Right.
He was a foreman or some kind of boss on Earth. He gets off the bus in the solid country. His feet are hurting him, and he is approached by one of the bright, solid spirits.
This spirit is named Len.
Yes. Now, the twist that Lewis introduces here is that on Earth, Len was a murderer.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he actually murdered a man named Jack. And the big ghost is absolutely outraged. He cannot fathom seeing Len radiant and joyful in heaven, while he, the big ghost, who considers himself a decent man, has been living in the squalor of the gray town.
The dialogue here is such a mirror for anyone who has ever felt like they've earned their way through life.
Oh, absolutely.
The big ghost is shouting at Len. He says, "I've gone straight all my life. I've done my best to bite everyone. I never asked for anything that wasn't mine by rights."
He's incredibly defensive.
Very. He says, "If I wanted a drink, I paid for it, and if I took my wages, I'd done my job." He is literally waving his earthly resume in the face of a heavenly being.
And he looks at Len, this forgiven murderer, and says, "I don't see myself going in the same boat with you."
Yeah, I'm a decent man, and if I had my rights, I'd have been here long ago. He absolutely refuses to accept what he derisively calls bleeding charity.
Bleeding charity. Len's response to that cuts to the very core of the Christian gospel.
What does he say?
Len tells him gently that he hasn't got his rights, because if he did, he wouldn't be in heaven either. Len says, "You will not get yours either. You'll get something far better."
Because Len openly admits that he was a murderer on Earth.
He does, but he also pulls back the curtain on the big ghost's earthly life. Len reveals that he murdered the big ghost in his heart deliberately for years on Earth.
Wow.
He says, "I used to lie awake at nights thinking what I'd do to you if ever I got the chance." This exposes the reality that the big ghost was a terrible, harsh, demanding boss who made life absolute misery for his workers.
Len tells him,
Yeah.
there are no private affairs.
No.
In the light of eternity, the idea that we are just minding our own business evaporates. Our attitudes, our harshness, the way we treat people when we think we're just exercising our authority.
It all has massive spiritual ripple effects.
So Len invites the big ghost to just ask for the bleeding charity, to just drop the resume and accept grace.
But the big ghost physically recoils. He would rather go back to the miserable gray town than be on the same level as a forgiven murderer.
He literally says, "I'd rather be damned than go along with you," and he limps back to the bus.
The theological dynamic happening here is the clash between two completely different economies of salvation. The big ghost is demanding dikaiosine.
Okay, and to play proxy for our listeners, when the theological commentaries use a word like dikaiosine, we are talking about a very specific kind of rigid justice, right?
Yes, exactly. In this context, it represents a self-claimed righteousness. It's the ledger system.
The ledger system.
Yeah, like, I did X amount of good deeds, therefore I am owed Y amount of reward. The big ghost's insistence on this ledger makes it fundamentally impossible for him to receive charis,
Which is divine grace.
or unmerited favor. The devotional sources we're pulling from state it perfectly. The cry for our rights sounds incredibly noble on earth.
But we build whole political and social systems around it.
We do. But before God, demanding your rights is a fatal misunderstanding of who God is and who we are.
Because if we truly received what we deserved based on our own mixed motives and hidden cruelties, we would stand condemned.
Exactly. The gospel doesn't offer us fairness. It offers us mercy.
Hell is locked from the inside. That concept just echoes in my mind reading this. The big ghost is not being barred from heaven by some angry bouncer,
No, he's locking his own door.
because he prefers his pride over submission. So what does this mean for us when we feel wronged or unappreciated at work or at home?
It's tough. Think about the last time you felt deeply wronged. Maybe at work you were passed over for a promotion you felt you deserved.
Or at home, you're keeping a silent tally of who did the dishes last, who took out the trash, who apologized last.
We get so completely wrapped up in our rights. We tell ourselves, I deserve to be spoken to this way, or I did all the right things. I have the right to be angry.
But to love Christ deeply requires us to completely tear up that ledger.
Every step toward true spiritual maturity begins with abandoning entitlement.
The soul that clings to fairness will always find a reason to be resentful, because life will never perfectly balance the scales.
But the soul that yields its rights finds that grace is not some humiliating handout. It's the only true liberation.
Imagine you are stranded on the roof of your house during a catastrophic flood.
Okay.
The water is rising.
Right.
A rescue helicopter drops a ladder down to you. But instead of grabbing the ladder, you cross your arms, look up at the pilot, and shout, "I'm not taking your charity. I'm a good swimmer."
That's insane.
Right. I took swimming lessons for 10 years. I have a right to survive on my own merits. Demanding your rights before God is like refusing the rescue helicopter because you think your earthly resume is a flotation device.
It is completely absurd when you look at it from the outside, but it's exactly what we do when we refuse to forgive someone because they haven't earned it yet.
And the tragedy is that This stubbornness isn't limited to the rough, blue-collar characters like the big ghost.
No, Lewis is very careful to show that our prisons are custom-built. We don't just lock ourselves away with our moral resumes. We do it with our intellects as well.
Which is a perfect pivot, because it's incredibly easy to listen to the story of the big ghost and think, well, I'm not like that. I'm reasonable. I'm educated.
I read theological commentaries and listen to deep dive discussions. I'm safe.
Right. But Lewis suggests that our intellect can actually build an even stronger, more subtle prison. Let's look at the encounter with the Episcopal ghost.
This is one of the most chilling portraits in the entire book. We meet a ghost who is described as wearing a bowler hat and gaiters.
Which immediately marks him to a British reader of the time as a high-ranking clergyman, right? A bishop.
Exactly. He wanders around the bright edges of heaven completely oblivious to his actual spiritual state.
He doesn't even know.
No. He runs into a solid spirit named Dick, who used to be his friend and colleague on Earth. And the Episcopal ghost thinks the dreary, rainy, gray town he just came from is just a spiritual nursery.
A nursery.
Yeah, he describes it as a place of hopeful progress and subdued and delicate half-light.
He is a theologian, and he literally does not know he is in hell.
It's tragic. Dick has to look at him and say, "You have been in hell. You went there because you are an apostate."
And the ghost is profoundly offended.
Oh, deeply. He defends his entire earthly career, his liberal theology, his denial of the literal, physical resurrection of Christ.
He defends all of it as just being a matter of honest opinions fearlessly followed.
He talks about how brave he was to preach his famous sermon defying orthodox doctrine, claiming he took immense risks to follow his intellect wherever it led.
But Dick completely deconstructs that narrative of intellectual bravery.
He really does. He points out to the bishop that there was no real risk involved at all. When the bishop embraced these progressive, unorthodox ideas, what actually happened?
Did he lose his job or face persecution?
No. He gained popularity, he sold books, he was invited to fancy dinners, he was eventually made a bishop.
Dick tells him, "We knew that you and I were playing with loaded dice.
Loaded dice.
We didn't want the other to be true. We were afraid of crude salvationism, afraid, above all, of real spiritual fears and hopes."
They didn't arrive at their theology through rigorous, objective study. They drifted into modern ideas because it was the current fashion.
And it protected them from the terrifying reality of a God who actually intervenes in history and makes absolute demands on their lives.
Their real gut punch comes when Dick offers the bishop a permanent place in heaven. Dick says, "I will bring you to the land not of questions, but of answers, and you shall see the face of God."
You would think a theologian would jump at that.
You would. But the ghost's reaction is horrifying. He rejects it.
He argues that a ready-made truth would put an end to all intellectual activity. He insists he needs the free play of mind.
He quotes the old proverb, "To travel, hopefully, is better than to arrive." He has reached the point where he actually prefers the search for truth over the truth itself.
What's fascinating here is how this illustrates a profound biblical concept. It reflects what the Apostle Paul writes about in Romans 1 regarding the darkening of the mind.
The noetic effects of sin.
Yes, the intellect is not a neutral, perfectly objective computer sitting in our heads. It's a God-given tool, but it's deeply influenced and often corrupted by our underlying desires.
The bishop didn't lose his faith because he found a definitive historical flaw in the Gospels. He lost it through what the book describes as drifting, unresisting, unpraying, accepting every half-conscious solicitation from our desires.
The subtlest of all snares is becoming more interested in proving God's existence, or writing elegant papers about him, or debating nuances of theology, than actually falling on your face and worshiping him.
And the absolute insanity of his choice is revealed when he tells Dick he can't stay in heaven because he has a pressing appointment back in hell.
Wait, what appointment?
He has to catch the bus back to the gray town to deliver a theological paper to a society of other ghostly intellectuals.
You've got to be kidding me.
No, and the topic of his paper, he's going to argue that Jesus died too young to reach his mature views.
Oh my goodness.
And that if Jesus had lived longer, he would have outgrown his early crude teachings about sin and salvation. The bishop believes he can be of great usefulness down in hell.
It is the sheer idolatry of the intellect. He refuses the blinding reality of heaven because it offers no sphere of usefulness for his specific, refined talents.
He wants to be the smartest guy in the room, even if that room is located in hell, rather than be a humble, awestruck child in heaven.
But let me push back here on behalf of the listener, because this can sound a bit, well, anti-intellectual. Isn't asking questions a good thing?
Of course it is.
We are doing a deep dive right now, analyzing texts and asking complex questions. Why is Lewis so incredibly tough on this ghost? Does God not want us to use the brains he gave us?
God absolutely wants us to use our brains. The issue Lewis is targeting is the ultimate purpose of our inquiry. Dick tells the Episcopal ghost, thirst was made for water, inquiry for truth.
Hmm.
Being interested in inquiry for its own sake, treating the debate as a permanent lifestyle rather than a journey toward a destination, is a perversion of the intellect.
It's like treating a bridge as a place to build a permanent house rather than a structure designed to get you safely to the other side.
That thirst analogy is perfect. Thirst is an uncomfortable biological signal meant to drive you to drink water.
Right.
If you just love the feeling of being thirsty and you intentionally avoid water so you can keep analyzing your thirst and writing poetry about how thirsty you are.
Something is deeply physically wrong with you.
Exactly. The application for us is striking. We are called to taste truth, to consume it, not just debate it endlessly in our church small groups or online forums.
Loving Christ means realizing that our intelligence was given to us specifically to find him.
It is terrifyingly easy to make an idol out of our own theological sophistication. We can read all the right books, listen to all the insightful discussions, and construct brilliant arguments.
And yet never actually yield our wills.
That is the danger of residing in the gray town of our own minds. But as challenging as the snare of the intellect is, the source material moves us into an even more difficult and uncomfortable area.
Oh boy.
We can all agree that pride and intellectual arrogance are pitfalls. But what happens when something that looks, feels, and acts exactly like love becomes the very thing keeping us from God?
Okay, here's where the deep dive gets incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Lewis gives us several devastating portraits of twisted, distorted love. It's shocking because we're so conditioned to think of love as the ultimate, unquestionable good.
Right.
Let's look at the ghost who was Robert's wife.
This ghost approaches one of the bright, solid women of heaven and immediately unloads a massive torrent of complaints about her earthly husband, Robert.
Her entire narrative is built around the claim that she sacrificed her whole life to make a man out of him. She views herself as a martyr to his mediocrity.
But as she talks, the ugly reality spills out between her words. She didn't support him. She nagged him relentlessly.
She forced him to work extra hours he didn't want to work. She systematically alienated all of his real friends because she deemed them not useful for his career advancement.
She forced him to buy a bigger house they couldn't afford purely for the sake of appearances and her own ambition.
She completely broke the poor man. She casually mentions that he had a nervous breakdown in the end.
And her response to that tragedy is, "My conscience is clear. I've done my duty by him."
And the absolute kicker of this encounter. She tells the bright spirit that she will only agree to stay in heaven on one condition.
They have to give Robert back to her.
Why? So she can have someone to do things to. She literally says, I must have a free hand. I want Robert. What right have you to keep him from me?
Her version of love was entirely about control. It was tyranny masquerading as self-sacrifice.
It is the horrifying realization that she never actually loved Robert as a person. She loved the project of Robert.
She loved her own agency, her own power, and the narrative of her own martyrdom. She cannot exist in a heaven where she doesn't have someone to manage and control.
But Lewis takes this critique of natural affection even further with the next portrait, which is arguably the most emotionally painful in the entire book.
Pam, the grieving mother.
Oh, this one is brutal. If you are a parent listening to this, prepare yourself.
Yeah.
Pam is a ghost who steps off the bus, expecting to immediately be reunited with her son, Michael.
Who died tragically young on Earth.
Right. But instead of Michael, she is met by her brother, Reginald, who is a solid spirit. Reginald tells her that Michael is further up in the mountains of the solid country, and she cannot see him yet because she is still too ghostly.
He tells her she needs to thicken up, to become solid by learning to want God for his own sake, before she can handle the reality of her son.
And Pam's reaction is explosive, righteous fury. She claims that mother love is the highest, holiest feeling in human nature.
She demands that God give her son to her immediately, claiming it as an inalienable right. She screams, "I don't believe in a God who keeps mother and son apart. He is mine. Mine, 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 forever and ever."
And Reginald has to speak some incredibly hard, painful truths to her. He points out that her instinctual, maternal love had become uncontrolled and monomaniac.
He reveals that for 10 years after Michael died, she kept his room exactly as he left it. She observed all the anniversaries of his death like dark religious rituals.
And in doing so, she essentially abandoned her husband and her surviving daughter, Muriel. She tyrannized her remaining family with her grief, making everyone bow to her sorrow.
Reginald tells her, It was the wrong way to deal with the sorrow. It was Egyptian, like embalming a dead body.
The theological analysis the sources provide here is absolutely vital for the Christian life. Natural affections, like a mother's love for a child, or romantic love between spouses, or deep friendship, are not inherently holy.
Lewis is very careful with this distinction. He says through his characters that natural feelings are all holy when God's hand is on the rein. They all go bad when they set up on their own and make themselves into false gods.
Pam had taken a good thing, love for her son, and made it an ultimate thing. She made Michael her god.
She loved him not as a creature lent to her by the Creator, but as her own exclusive possession. And because she refused to love God first, her love for Michael became a twisted, selfish obsession that consumed her identity.
And destroyed her ability to love anyone else.
Yeah.
I have to pause and push back on this, though, because I know people listening are feeling a knot in their stomachs.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
It feels incredibly harsh, almost cruel, to tell a grieving mother that her love for her dead child was a defect. In our culture, grief is practically sacred. It almost feels offensive to critique it.
It is deeply offensive to our modern sensibilities. We have elevated romantic and familial love to the highest possible good in our society. We say love is love as if any strong affection automatically justifies itself. But the devotional sources address this directly. In our earthly relationships, we so often use the word love to describe something that is actually designed to fill our own inner emptiness.
We cling to our children, our spouses, or our friends because we're afraid to be alone, or because they provide us with our sense of identity and purpose.
Lewis is distinguishing between true charity, what the theologians call caritas, the love that flows from God and wills the ultimate good and freedom of the other,
And natural affection, which is instinctual, biologically driven, and, if untamed by submission to God, inherently possessive.
Think of the analogy of a parent holding a child's hand. You hold your toddler's hand tightly to protect them when you're crossing a busy street.
That's good and necessary.
But if you hold their hands so tightly and refuse to ever let go out of your own paralyzing fear of them getting hurt, that you end up literally crushing the child's fingers and breaking their bones, that is no longer love.
That is your own anxiety and desperate need for control masquerading as protection. Pam's grief was crushing her surviving family.
And this tragic distortion of love is illustrated one more time in the portrait of the tragedian and the dwarf.
This is one of the most surreal, visually brilliant, and psychologically complex images in the entire allegory.
It really is. A radiant, massive lady named Sarah Smith comes down to meet her earthly husband, Frank. On Earth, Sarah was just an ordinary, unheralded woman, but in heaven, she is a giant because of her immense, overflowing, selfless love.
But Frank doesn't appear as a normal ghost. He appears as two distinct entities bound together. He is a tiny, miserable, shrinking little dwarf holding a chain.
And on the end of the chain is a tall, theatrical, melodramatic ghost called the tragedian.
The dwarf represents Frank's actual inner self, which has shriveled up over years of self-pity. The tragedian represents the false, dramatic persona he uses to manipulate everyone around him.
And whenever Frank wants to speak to Sarah, the dwarf jerks the chain and uses the tragedian to speak for him in this deep, wounded, theatrical voice.
Trying to guilt-trip his radiant wife, he uses his own misery, his pity, to try and blackmail her into being miserable alongside him.
He cannot stand the fact that she is happy. He says, "You don't want even to hear of my sufferings. You who can be happy without me, forgetting me."
He is profoundly offended by her heavenly joy. He wants her to need him, to be broken without him, because that is the only way he knows how to feel powerful.
But Sarah, shining with the impenetrable love of God, refuses to be blackmailed by his misery. She tells him that what they called love on earth was mostly just the craving to be loved.
She says, "I am full now, not empty. I am in love himself, not lonely." She begs him to let go of the tragedian, to drop the mask of the wounded victim and enter into true joy, where they will have no need for one another now. We can begin to love truly.
He refuses. The dwarf shrinks down so small he is almost swallowed up by the chain, and the tragedian vanishes in a puff of bitter resentment. He chooses his miserable persona over genuine communion.
So what is the practical application here for us? It's the hard realization that we cannot truly love anyone, not our spouse, not our kids, not our closest friends, until we find our total satisfaction and identity in Christ.
Only when we are filled to overflowing by love himself are we truly free to love others without secretly needing them to validate us or make us happy or jump through our emotional hoops.
You can see why the journey to heaven is so difficult for these ghosts. They're asked to drop their ledgers of righteousness, their intellectual pride, and their deepest, most cherished emotional attachments.
You might wonder if anyone ever actually makes it. What does it actually look like, practically and spiritually, when someone finally says yes to the agonizing process of letting go of their sin?
That brings us to one of the most unforgettable, visceral scenes in the entire book, the agony and glory of mortification. We finally get to see someone make the right choice, and it involves a character known as the man with the red lizard.
Let's set the stage for this encounter, because it perfectly maps onto the psychology of human addiction and sin.
The narrator sees a ghost hobbling along the grass, and sitting on this ghost's shoulder is a dark, oily, twitching little red lizard. The lizard is constantly whispering in the ghost's ear.
This lizard represents lust, sensuality, or any persistent, besetting sin of the flesh that we carry around with us.
The ghost is clearly annoyed by it. He tells it to shut up, but he's also resigned to its presence. He carries it. Then, a massive burning angel approaches them.
The text describes the angel as being like the morning sun at the beginning of a tyrannous summer day. Immense burning purity.
And the angel walks up to the ghost and asks one simple, terrifying question. May I kill it?
And the ghost's immediate reaction is a masterclass in the anatomy of temptation and the negotiation tactics we all use to protect our sin. He immediately starts making excuses and trying to delay the process.
He said, "You're burning me." Then he tries to change the terms. You didn't say anything about killing him at first. Then he suggests a more moderate approach. I think the gradual process would be far better than killing it.
When that doesn't work, he plays the victim. I'm not feeling frightfully well today. Some other day, perhaps. He tries every single negotiation tactic known to man.
And then the lizard itself starts whispering to the ghost, manipulating his deepest fears. The lizard says, "He can kill me. Then you'll be without me forever and ever. I know there are no real pleasures now, only dreams. But aren't they better than nothing? And I'll be so good. I promise I won't do it again."
This captures the exact internal dialogue of anyone struggling with a deep-rooted sin. We tell ourselves, just one more time, I can manage it. If I give this up entirely, my life will be utterly devoid of comfort or pleasure.
The ghost genuinely believes that if the angel kills the lizard, the ghost himself will die from the pain of the loss. But the angel is relentless, yet entirely respectful of the ghost's agency.
He simply keeps repeating the question, may I kill it? He will not act without the ghost's explicit permission.
Finally, pushed to the absolute edge, the ghost breaks. He screams, "Damn and blast you! Go on, can't you? Get it over! Do what you like!"
And the angel's crimson hands close on the reptile, snap its back, and fling it to the turf. The ghost screams in absolute searing agony. But then, the miracle happens.
As the ghost reels backward from the pain, he begins to change. He begins to grow solid. The agony gives way to an immense radiant reality. He transforms into a massive, naked man shining with light.
But the deeper theological point that Lewis makes here is what happens to the physical body of the lizard. It isn't just destroyed and swept away.
No.
The dead lizard transforms into a magnificent, silvery white stallion with a golden mane. The new-made man leaps onto the stallion's back, and together they ride in joyous, explosive power, the earth shaking beneath them, straight up into the high mountains of heaven.
I get chills every time I read that. The sources point out that this is a brilliant illustration of the Apostle Paul's theology of mortifying the flesh. In Colossians 3, Paul writes about putting to death whatever belongs to your earthly nature.
And Lewis provides this incredible aha moment regarding human desire. We often think that our sinful desires, our lust, our greed, our ambition are too strong, and that God wants to weaken us and make us docile.
But Lewis argues the exact opposite.
That is the pivotal insight. George MacDonald, who acts as the heavenly guide in the story, explains it perfectly. He says, lust is a poor, weak, whimpering, whispering thing compared with that richness and energy of desire which will arise when lust has been killed.
God doesn't want to extinguish our desires. He views our current sinful desires as pitiful, atrophied, twisted versions of the immense joy and energy we're actually created for.
The magnificent stallion is the resurrected, redeemed body of that appetite.
So what does this mean for the listener on a random Tuesday? How often do you and I pray, asking the Lord to simply manage or tame our sins?
Lord, help me not look at pornography as much. Lord, help me just be a little less angry with my kids.
We want to keep a little bit of the old self on a leash, like a pet lizard. We want a spiritual Band-Aid. But the path to daily transformation, to actually loving Christ more deeply, requires a death.
It is the stark difference between simple behavior modification and actual biblical sanctification. If you have a life-threatening malignant tumor, you cannot treat it with a painkiller or a holistic tea.
You require the surgeon's scalpel. Yes, the surgery is incredibly painful. The ghost screams in agony when the lizard is crushed. Mortifying our sin hurts our pride, it hurts our flesh, it disrupts our comfort.
But it is the only way to save the life. You cannot just delete the lizard from your life. You must allow the Holy Spirit to kill it. And when you finally surrender it, God resurrects that exact energy into something glorious that carries you toward Him.
When we allow Christ to perform that surgery, when we surrender our rights, our intellects, our twisted loves, and our lizards, it doesn't just change our trajectory moving forward.
No, according to the final theological vision in Lewis's book, it actually retroactively changes the meaning of our entire past.
This brings us to what is perhaps the most mind-bending theological concept in the entire book. George MacDonald explains to the narrator the retrospective nature of eternity.
He says that heaven, once attained, will work backwards and turn even earthly agony into a glory. For the saved, their past begins to change in retrospect, so that forgiven sins and remembered sorrows take on the quality of heaven.
But conversely, for the damned, hell will spread back and contaminate even their past sinful pleasures.
MacDonald says, they say of some temporal suffering, no future bliss can make up for it, not knowing that heaven, once attained, will work backwards and turn even that agony into a glory.
Think about it this way. Imagine you are on a really grueling, miserable, multi-day hike up a mountain. It is pouring rain. You are freezing, your feet are covered in blisters, your muscles are screaming, you are miserable.
Sounds awful.
But when you finally reach the summit, the clouds suddenly break, the sun comes out, and the view is the most magnificent, breathtaking thing you have ever seen in your life.
It changes everything.
Suddenly you look back on the blisters, the cold, and the rain, and you don't resent them anymore. They're transformed in your memory into the necessary, even treasured steps that brought you to this glory.
That is a very apt earthly analogy for a massive divine reality. The theological concept here is teleological eschatology.
Let's break that down for the listener.
Simply put, it means that our final destination redefines our entire journey. Time is not just a straight line, it is a canvas that heaven paints backward over. Lewis illustrates this near the end of the book with a vision.
The narrator sees a giant silver table with little chessmen moving around on it.
The silver table represents time, and the chessmen are men and women making choices. MacDonald explains that time is just a lens through which we, as temporal creatures, view eternal choices. Every single choice we make calcifies into our permanent character.
So if time is just a lens or a silver table we're moving around on, does what we do on a random Tuesday morning actually matter? Does it really matter in the grand scheme of eternity if I choose to snap at my kids in frustration or if I bite my tongue and show patience?
It matters infinitely, because as MacDonald says in the book, there are only two kinds of people in the end, those who say to God, thy will be done, and those to whom God says, in the end, thy will be done.
Every single small choice you make today is a rehearsal for that final, eternal decision. You are, right now, with every interaction, building the internal capacity to bear what Lewis famously called the weight of glory.
The text talks about bearing the load or weight or burden of my neighbor's glory. We must recognize that the annoying coworker who talks too loud, the frustrating family member who always needs money, the stranger who cuts you off in traffic, they're not mere interruptions to your day.
They are immortal beings. You cannot be a solid Christian if you are living with ghostly neighbors. That line from one of the devotional sources is staggering.
It means we cannot isolate ourselves. If God's redemption retroactively fixes our past wounds and turns them into a testimony of grace, then every mundane moment is infused with eternal weight.
The Great Divorce isn't just a cosmic event that happens at the end of time. It is a present reality happening in the micro-decisions of our hearts every single day.
It is the ultimate ongoing separation between the real self, which is submitted to God and growing solid, and the imagined prideful self, which is fading into the isolation of the gray town.
Let's pull all these threads together into a final synthesis. What are the key takeaways from this journey into the solid country? First, hell is not a torture chamber run by God. It is a self-chosen isolation.
It is locked from the inside by souls who prefer their own pride, their endless grievances, and their demand for fairness over the difficult, weighty, self-denying reality of divine joy.
Second, heaven is offered freely to everyone, but it demands the total, agonizing surrender of our cherished sins, our false intellectual personas, and even our most precious earthly attachments.
The lizard must be killed.
And third, the gospel does not just promise future bliss as a reward, it demands present transformation. It calls us to wake up from the gray twilight of our self-absorption. Loving Christ deeply means yielding our fragile, defensive, easily offended wills to his perfect, solid reality.
I want to address you, the listener, directly as we wrap up. We've
Sure.
taken this bus ride together. We've felt the diamond grass. Now we have to look in the mirror.
What lizards are you petting right now? Making excuses for, hoping God will just manage them instead of demanding you put them to death? What rights are you angrily demanding from your spouse, your boss, or from God himself?
Whose pity are you manipulating to keep yourself comfortable in your own familiar misery? We are all carrying some baggage from the gray town.
This brings us to a fascinating historical and theological concept mentioned briefly by George MacDonald in the text, which leaves us with a profound question. It is the concept of the refrigerium.
It is a very old idea found in some early church writings, suggesting that the damned occasionally get holidays or excursions, that the bus ride Lewis describes is a regular occurrence.
So picture yourself standing at that bus stop in the endless rainy twilight of your own resentments. The bus arrives. The golden light spills out onto the wet pavement. You are holding a ticket.
If you were given a bus ticket out of your own personal gray town of grievances today, would you actually be willing to leave your baggage on the bus to walk on the hard, solid grass of reality? Or would you step out, feel the sharp pain of truth, find the light of God's demands too blinding, and scramble back onto the bus to protect your pride? The door is open. The choice is yours.